This is the 10-Minute Contrarian Podcast. This is VP. We are a solutions-based podcast, diving into the world of contrarian investing and alternative finance. You can find us hosted on the No Nonsense Forex YouTube channel, nononsenseforex.com, and podcast players everywhere. Episode 181 is brought to us by Bybit. Now, episode 181 is also going to be about finding things early on and realizing their upside potential while also understanding their downside and how you can really get the best of it without taking a lot of risks. And that's what I found with Bybit almost 4 years ago. Fast forward to now, it is one of the largest, most well-capitalized, most popular places for anybody to come in and trade. Unless you're an American, of course. Now, if you are not American, go down and check this place out. The link is down below in the description. It'll take you to the blog. The blog tells you everything you need to know. And then get yourself signed up through my affiliate link at the very bottom. Because the amount of contests and promotions and giveaways and airdrops in this place, along with having the best trading platform in the world, is ridiculous. Because as so many people now know with Bybit membership, has its rewards. It is a 10-Minute Contrarian Podcast, and I could be super duper obnoxious in this episode. And I would have a right to be, I think. But I'm going to do my best to hold it together and go over a lot of the crypto picks that we have displayed on this channel over time and talk about them. Now, I would normally do this in the crypto predictions episode in January. But what I think I'm going to do is during that episode, give kind of a more holistic idea of where I think crypto is going, and then talk about a lot of the tokens that I don't talk about today. But we're going to get some of the big ones out of the way. And you saw the title. And these are, what we're talking about today, are mostly tokens that a lot of people had given up on. Whether it's new investors coming into the space or people who've just been around a while and were just tired of waiting for these things to move up in price. And it's funny, too, because even people who are in my heavy podcast rotation and people I respect, other generalists, because we're generalists here on the show, but other generalists like Raoul Pal and Scott Melker, both are on the record for shitting on the coins and tokens that we're going to talk about today, because they're yesterday's news. And you need to be focusing in on these other tokens that are a lot more exciting. And in some cases, to their credit, they were right about those newer tokens. Sometimes they weren't always right. But they were dead wrong about what is now known, I suppose, as dinosaur tokens. Very wrong. And I'm going to explain today why they were so very wrong. Stay tuned until the end of the episode, to where I'm going to kind of sum everything up and tell you why having positions in the tokens we're about to talk about today is absolutely where you want to be going forward. But dinosaur token holders, we were very vindicated and very validated this past month when we finally got the pumps we were waiting for. A lot of us are sitting there watching other people make a bunch of money on these newer, shinier objects. Now, these people also, oddly enough, almost never talk about the times where they went after a newer, shinier object and it bit them in the ass and they lost a bunch of money. Because they do not focus on their downside the way we do here at the 10-Minute Contrarian Podcast. We here understand that you can go after asymmetrical upside and get it without taking huge losses, which we rarely do. I'm telling you, I think very few podcasts give you this level of alpha to where you're getting so much upside with so little downside. And yet we stay quite small. This podcast goes out to anywhere from usually 5,000 to 7,000 people, depending on what I'm talking about. And some of the most important episodes, I think, end up being sometimes the ones that go out to the least amount of people. Like the CEF's episode, the closed-end funds episode. Those of you who have heard that episode, could you imagine not knowing about that going forward? But there's quite a few people who are never going to know because they just weren't interested in the title or the description or just a closed-end fund just didn't sound appealing to them. I'm not sure what it was, but that was one of my lower-rated episodes in the past few months. But the point is, you really shouldn't miss out on these. I'm okay with being smaller. But as far as the things we invest in and the way we do it and the patience that we have, that a lot of these larger podcasts simply do not. It really puts us ahead of them at the end of the day. Not when it comes to production value or interviews or experience or anything like that. But when it comes to your bottom line, I think there are very few places out there that do it like we do. So let's go over these tokens, and let's start with Cardano. Fuck yeah. Cardano pretty much 4x'd in the past month. Actually, let me go double check that. Okay, glad I double checked. Not maybe the last 4 weeks, but in the past 6 weeks or so. It's kind of crawling along at that 30-cent level and now is over $1.20. And this is very vindicating because this is the one token that so many people love to shit on. And they all have one thing in common. They don't know very much about Cardano. Seriously, ask one of these people. Say, tell me something about Cardano. What makes Cardano what it is? What makes it unique? Explain to me the UTXO method. Explain to me the Voltaire upgrade. They can't do it. Which is weird because you think if they would take so much time to put something down, they would actually know what they're putting down, but they don't do that. Now, I'll give Alex Becker a pass. I think Alex Becker does understand Cardano. He's just being a troll because the people who back this coin tend to be very, very emotional, a bit too much so sometimes, and so they become easy targets, and I totally get it. But there is a reason why the community is so enthusiastic. This blockchain is pretty great, and people are finally starting to realize just how. Now, one of the big criticisms, very unfair criticisms, was that it is no longer known as a fast chain. It was at one time, but then other chains came around and started to do things faster, so Cardano lost that advantage over time. Now, what a lot of people didn't know is that Cardano has upgrades. And they have things like Hydra, which are being built, just weren't built yet because Cardano takes their time, which is one of the things that grown-up investors like us really like about it. And now that Hydra is here, and now that it just did 1 million transactions per second, I want to see where those people are now. You know, the whole TPS thing is kind of I don't know if it's just more of like a vanity metric at this point. It's like, why do we need that much TPS? Well, right now we don't. But if this really is going to be the future of computing and payments and all the things that we expect it to be, it does need to be really fast. And it needs to be a lot faster than what we have currently. And Cardano is. Now, there are other really fast chains out there, and there will be other chains in the future that will do things and process transactions faster than Cardano does. But there are a lot of things that they just simply won't have that are very unique to Cardano and makes Cardano very appealing. Don't forget, episode 150, that was a big one, where we talked about some of the major partnerships a lot of the tokens we hold, a lot of the companies behind those tokens have with major companies already. Whenever you're looking to invest into a layer one or really any token out there, I want you to go and research this. See what type of partnerships they already have. Because a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. Or the one I like even better, a bird in the hand is worth 1,000 flying in the air that you don't have yet. And Cardano already has major partnerships. And one of the more recent ones that came about, that I don't think anybody had on their bingo card, was the new partnership they have now with Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin is building out their overall blockchain ecosystem, but it's going to take a while to get there. And in the meantime, they have teamed up with Cardano to do some really cool things. That almost needs to be its own episode. I'm not going to spend too much time here because we're already at the 9-minute mark in the podcast. And we have a lot more tokens to talk about, but super exciting. You know, you have a chain that has shown that it can also be really fast once they finally get things where they need to be. You have a very intriguing partnership with Bitcoin now, and you have a founder who is just a huge crypto advocate that people can really get behind. And I do think that means something going forward, especially for investors. Now, moving on to another token, another Dinosaur token that everybody crapped on because they thought their time was done, but they don't have the level of patience that we have here at the podcast, and that is going to be XRP, who has done a 5x in the past month. And the big move up here was really the new administration in the United States. There's a direct tie there because really no token out there got harmed worse than XRP did during this whole Operation Choke Point 1.0 and 2.0. The whole reason why XRP was so high up in market cap to begin with is because of the idea of what it was supposed to be. And this idea and this potential never changed in the last 4 years. The only issue were all the barriers that XRP had to face along the way. And now those barriers are gone. So XRP can finally be, and Ripple can finally be the company and the token it was always meant to be. Hence the move up in price. And so if you're an XRP holder, you should be very excited because not only did you get a nice little present this past month, but you are a holder of something that has extraordinary potential. Now, I have no idea if this potential is going to be reached, but one of the big to-dos now is this new stablecoin they're bringing out, RLUSD, which has a lot of applications to it, but one of the main ones, and this is quite lofty, and I have no idea if it's going to happen, but God damn it if it does, you're going to really want to be an XRP holder at any price at this point, to where they're talking about RLUSD being the main stablecoin that ends up replacing the SWIFT payment system that is used all around the world. Now, again, this is going to be tough to do because there are a lot of clearinghouses and, just unnecessary entities that don't need to be there that are making gobs and gobs of money off the SWIFT payment system. But it's going to get replaced someday. It has to. And what is it going to get replaced by? We know blockchain is the future of payments, so it's probably going to be something on the blockchain. And people are talking now that this RLUSD stablecoin or something from Ripple in some capacity is going to be that thing. Oh boy. You want to talk about upside? There it is. You have all these new blockchains and all these new companies promising to do all these cool new things. None of them are attempting to unseat the SWIFT freaking payment system. There is no more ambitious goal in all of crypto. So again, I have no idea if it's going to happen, but even if it doesn't, we've already gotten a 5x just on the idea that it might. How good is that? Now let's go ahead and move on over to Avalanche, which did a humble 2x this past month. And so you didn't hear a whole lot about it, but I'm always learning more about the tokens I have. And we talked about those partnerships a little bit ago. AVAX has a lot of them, and they actually have more than I thought in one particular sector. Now, AVAX is known, as far as your bigger layer ones, for being really the top of the heap in terms of gaming, which that sector hasn't even really gotten started yet. But that's super exciting. But it really is becoming now the top of the heap for banking, like major banks. Even SWIFT has latched onto Avalanche a little bit currently. But you have like Franklin Templeton and JP Morgan and Citibank and just even more banks than I mentioned in that episode have latched themselves on to the Avalanche blockchain. I mean, this is where they want to be. So imagine being already invested in the top layer one for gaming and banking both. Tremendous. So let's go ahead and keep it moving and move over to Aave, which was also very quiet because it did not even really do a 2x in the past month, but it has almost 3x'd from where we mentioned it. So we are getting very close to taking profit here. And if you didn't already know, I always announce when I'm taking profit on my crypto tokens on Twitter, on X. And you can follow me there, and the link is always down below in the show notes. But to go ahead and give an update here, we've always liked Aave because that's where the big money wants to do DeFi. The smaller money typically goes elsewhere because really, to be honest, the yields on Aave were never very high. They were often quite small, anywhere from maybe 2 to 3% on the high end. But big money liked it because big money, like we always try to do, they care about their downside. And one of the safest places you could possibly do DeFi was on Aave. Now, recently they came out with version 3, and version 3 is quite an improvement, especially in terms of yields. You might want to go check right now. Type in the token you are interested in staking and see what type of yield you can get. Do this with stablecoins as well. Now you're not only getting the better downside protection that you would get from someplace like Aave, but you're getting more upside now too. The one thing that was really, I felt, holding Aave back from becoming even bigger than it already was, and it's already huge, was those upside yields. And that problem is now being fixed. It's a pretty great place to be. Now, if we're going to talk about dinosaur coins in this episode, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about probably the one coin that I am in and love and promote, but almost nobody rocks with me on, and that's going to be Litecoin. And yes, Litecoin did a 2x in the past month. And here's what's great about it too. We just talked about downside protection when we talked about Aave. With Litecoin, you're not really investing in a company like you are with almost anything that's not Bitcoin or a stablecoin. Or a meme coin, I guess, but we don't do those on the show. And just like Bitcoin, and this is how I've explained to people with Bitcoin, because, when Bitcoin pumps, you usually get people coming out of the woodwork and asking you about it, and that I'm no exception here. And one of the biggest things, the biggest fears I guess people have is, well, now that it's at 100,000, they feel like the risk is greater and the upside gains are more limited. And I tell them two things. I say, well, one, this is exactly what everybody thought when Bitcoin first hit $500. $500 a coin, that's crazy. And people had the exact same fears that people have right now. So that should tell you something. But this fear for your average normie investor that doesn't really know or understand this space, it's often just too much to get past. So they just end up passing up on Bitcoin yet again, like I'm sure they probably did when it was at a much cheaper price. And there's nothing you can do about that. So I just try to rationalize that to them. And I say this to them as well. I say, look, it's hard to wrap your head around this concept as well. But when you're buying Bitcoin, you're not really buying it at a certain price. You're just really increasing your piece of the overall pie. Because as we've talked about on the show before, it's obvious that Bitcoin is finite, has a finite supply, but that's one of the most extraordinary things about it, and I think probably the single most slept on thing about Bitcoin, is that every time you buy it, you're increasing your share of the overall pie. You simply cannot do this with cash or with gold or with stocks, but you can here, and that's really exciting. So don't look at Bitcoin as buying it at a certain price. Look at it as increasing your overall share of the potential future of money. And ask yourself this too, long term, if you think price is going to go up against your dollar, well, then it might not be a terrible thing to buy. Because people are really waking up or have woken up to the fact in the past 3 or 4 years, especially when inflation came around in 2022, that simply holding dollars is quite a losing proposition. And if you're holding other fiat currencies not named the dollar, it's even a bigger losing proposition more often than not. So something should be done. Now, taking all of this back over to Litecoin, the cool thing about Litecoin is it may not pump the way Bitcoin has yet. If you want to go see my crazy cuckoo theory, go all the way back to the Litecoin episode. It's like episode 18 or something like that. Just go to your podcast player, or if your podcast player doesn't go that far back, just go to YouTube and type in Litecoin on my channel, and you'll see that episode pop up. But we're not going to rehash that theory today, but just know that it is there, and it is still intact, and I think it's going to happen. But even if it doesn't, with Litecoin, if you put $10 into Bitcoin, you do get a small piece of the pie. If you put $10 into Litecoin, you get a much bigger piece of the pie, 4 times bigger to be exact. And at the end of the day, do you believe that this will go up against the current price of your fiat currency? That's really, at the end of the day, the one question you have to ask yourself. And with Litecoin, to me, the answer is absolutely yes. Therefore, what I've been doing with some of the profit I've been taking on my crypto lately, what I'll normally do is put it into Tether and then stake that Tether somewhere and get yield. Recently, I've been taking some of that profit and buying more Litecoin with it. Because what the majority of people do will just take profit and put it into fiat currency and let it sit there and not do anything. What's better than that is taking that fiat currency and gaining yield from it, which we've done an entire episode on. It's called FYPM. You can go look that one up too. What I think could be even better than that is putting it into something like Litecoin and steadily increasing that piece of the pie that I already have even more. Now, you could also do this with Bitcoin. But I'm already pretty invested in Bitcoin. You guys who have been here know that I started in 2020 when it was at 8,600, right around there. And I also have a proxy Bitcoin miner running. Well, it's not running yet, but it's about to. And when it does, it's going to be earning me Bitcoin passively already. So I feel less of a need, or I'm compelled less, to spend my fiat currency on more Bitcoin for that reason. And again, I don't need Litecoin to go to the moon here by doing this. I just need it to outpace my fiat currency and have it do a better job than staking my Tether would do. That's it. It's a risk, I suppose, but I think it's a pretty solid risk. It's a risk worth taking. So that's what I've been doing lately. And I just thought I would share that with you, and I couldn't think of a more appropriate place to do it than right here in this episode on Dinosaur tokens. Because there are a few things more Dinosaur than Litecoin. Now, I don't think it would be fair to have an episode like this and not talk about some of the older tokens that have lagged a bit. Not everything has shot up, but that's okay. That does not decrease my confidence in any of these tokens that I hold. But I would have thought that as great as it is, we would also see a pump from Chainlink, but we just didn't. And I've seen a few people see this as an opportunity to kind of use that, I guess the sour divergence term that we throw around here sometimes on the show, and purchase more Chainlink. And I am not upset at that. Because as I have said in the past, at the end of the day, all roads lead to Chainlink. And you want to see a project that is unique to most other projects, to where it has a lot less competition and is doing some really, really remarkable things, and is a company that so many other crypto companies and so many Web 2 companies and so many banks and everything are going to end up relying on. Chainlink is it, and it has not pumped out of control. Not financial advice. I'm just simply pointing this out. So speaking of laggards, let's go ahead and finish up with Polygon. Now, Polygon actually did do a 2x this past month, but a lot of people, myself included, have been taking a loss overall on the Matic POL token. So this would make it a bit less exciting than it would normally be. However, we've said this in the past. Polygon is being very quiet about what they're doing, but don't forget the partnerships they already have. Those partnerships are gigantic. This is the layer 2 that the most amount of major companies want to be on, and that means a lot. And you can't sit there and write these layer 1s and layer 2s off for being slow or for being underdeveloped, because as we saw with Cardano, sometimes it's just a matter of waiting it out. It's not like these chains have just stopped developing and stopped growing and stopped innovating. And if you really think that Polygon has stopped doing all of those things, well, then do not invest in it and sell your tokens and buy something else. But I don't believe that. And so I am very content with the position I have there. Now, I told you all to stick around until the end of the show. It's a longer one today, and explain to you the significance of why it's so important to have positions in these tokens, and why if you all have already had positions in these tokens and experienced the great upside that we have seen in the past month or so, how we are so primed and so positioned for great things going forward. First of all, I just want everybody to know that these things take time. These are projects that are brand new with no precedent, and they take time to develop. And I said in previous episodes how I didn't quite understand this about the metaverse in gaming, but somehow I did understand it here. It does make sense. I'm not a tech gaming guy. I'm a finance guy. And when everybody in the space was, not so much in the crypto native space, they kind of got it, but a lot of more general finance people kept shitting on these projects. I'm like, you boneheads, these things take time to develop. And you need to let them do that. And you're not doing that. You're just simply giving up on them. They're still in the development stage for the most part. And they're going to be going forward. Even when they're being used by major companies, they're going to keep developing and keep improving, like a proper tech company should and does. But now that you have legacy, well-known, strong, and very well-capitalized companies ready to take that next step forward. These companies have now become the core of the crypto space. So if you are a new company coming out of wherever, it doesn't matter, and you are looking for maybe a layer 1 or a DeFi project, for example, to latch onto, who are you going to choose now? Remember, you are pouring your heart and your soul and all of your time and all of your money and all of your family's money into this new business, and you need to pick a blockchain company. Who are you going to choose at this point? Are you going to choose one of these large companies that proves they have the capacity and the capability to suit your needs and already has the social proof of all these gigantic companies latching onto them? Or are you going to pick a more upstart layer 1 or layer 2, for example, that is the new shiny object that is promising all these things, but has not shown that they have the staying power that these other companies have? The choice is going to be obvious. And if for some reason they want to go with a more shiny object blockchain, they're probably going to go with something a little more established out there, something like, SWI, which we also hold in our portfolio. Like, the choice is going to be obvious for these new companies coming in and for older institutions and Web 2 companies that are finally making that switch over to blockchain. They're not going to be choosing these upstarts. They never do. Their shareholders simply wouldn't allow it, for one. But these companies didn't become big because they were stupid and reckless. They're going to partner up with the new crypto blue bloods, which is now what we hold. Simply because we did the research and we had the patience to wait it out. And now we are primed and loaded for the future of computing and payments and gaming and everything else. Congrats, contrarians, for all of you who bought and stuck it out. We are locked, loaded, armed to the teeth, and ready to go. Now, at this point, some of you who may not be in a lot of these projects are wondering, what's cheap right now? If everything already ran this much, maybe you're looking for something cheap to invest in. And right now, there's not a whole lot of things. You have to ask yourself, though, if this really is the future the way I'm saying it is, then yeah, right now, almost all these projects are going to be exceptionally cheap. Not financial advice. I bought a long time ago. I like to buy when things are really cheap. Call me crazy. But relative to what they might be in the future, we could still be looking at really cheap prices right now. Cheap prices for something that's a lot more proven than a lot of other things that are out there. Just keep that in mind. I knew about Bitcoin back when it was sitting around $500, and I didn't invest until it was $8,600. Which that's a really big jump from $500. Let's be honest, and that kind of hurts. But I'm really glad I did it. So carry that mentality forward into some of these projects. But I'll throw you a bone here. As far as what's really, really cheap out there, I got something for you. Stay tuned next week. But for now, let's raise a glass. One glass, as I always say. We can never drink the full bottle. That day will never come. We can only have a glass. But let's have that glass. Let's pour ourselves a nice glass of champagne on this Saturday afternoon. Raise it up, and let's have a toast. I'll go ahead and say the toast. To the majority of crypto Twitter and financial YouTube and financial podcasts, we heard you snicker. We heard you laugh at us. We heard about all the fantastic gains you were getting in all of these newfangled projects, while purposely not telling us about the losses. But guess what? Your lack of research and your lack of patience has now left you out in the cold when it comes to participating in some of the absolute best projects in all of crypto and all of blockchain. I hope you people had your fun, because in the end, we weren't crazy. You impatient sons of bitches. We were just early.